Welcome inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Dan Hope joined by Andy Anders. A much-awaited rainy day here in Columbus, and you kind of got that a little bit of a gloomy nature in Tuesday's press conference at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, which was a little bit off-putting to me because Ohio State just beat Marshall fairly convincingly for its third straight win to begin the year, wrapping up non-conference play, but certainly a big change in the calendar this week as Ohio State prepares to begin Big Ten play with a road contest against Michigan State. And I think you saw somewhat of a change in tenor in Ryan Day, that he knows the competition's about to get tougher for the Buckeyes, and he does not want his team to be satisfied with what it's accomplished thus far.
Nothing is good right now. That was the quote today for Ryan Day. They aren't.
I think it was. I don't feel good about anything right now. Nobody should feel good about anything right now.
Nobody should feel good about anything. Exactly. This is. As a head coach, you never want your team to rest on any accomplishments it's made. Obviously, you have to keep getting better every week. That's the nature of being a head coach. But this was an especially just kind of testy press conference from Ryan Day. I felt like shortened some of his answers. Didn't feel ashamed about getting a little, not heated at times, maybe isn't the right word, but just... You could tell there's a lot of, maybe, I don't know if it's pressure, but it's hard to explain exactly what the feeling was in there. It was kind of weird just how serious, how short Ryan Day got with some of his answers, and the overall feeling kind of matched the weather outside, like you said, and kind of an interesting aura about Ryan here. And, I think a lot of it just comes from knowing how important this season is, knowing what Ohio State has in front of them, and now the real challenge starts. I asked the first question of today's press conference, which is a rarity, I must say. Kind of caught me a little off guard, but I asked a question about the offensive line, guys playing in space, guys pulling and lead blocking on screens, and Ryan essentially, like you put it, in so many words told me, haven't played anybody yet, right? That was kind of the subtext of what was there. And I think Ohio State has made good strides these first few weeks, but there's still a lot out there for them to prove. And I guess that's kind of what Day wanted to echo in his press conference today.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about the first half of this season being a ramp up for Ohio State. And I think the first 3 weeks were kind of a gradual ramp. And now the ramp's going to start to get a little bit steeper as you get into Big Ten play. And this week, still a team that Ohio State's favored to beat pretty significantly in Michigan State, but a team that is 3-1 so far this year, lost to Boston College this past weekend, but has a Big Ten win over Maryland, has been competitive. I think certainly the best defense that Ohio State will have faced so far this year. Also, I think the best quarterback. I think maybe my biggest surprise at today's press conference is the name Aidan Chiles was not said once, which surprises me. Now, granted, Aidan Chiles has thrown 7 interceptions this year, the most in the Big Ten. I think if Aidan Chiles continues to have some of the inconsistency, erratic passing that he's had in these first 4 games, I think Ohio State should be able to capitalize on that. I think that should be a big goal for the Buckeyes. We heard a lot of talk about turnovers coming into the season. Didn't see a ton the last couple weeks after a few in week 1. I think that should be a big goal for the Buckeyes to try to capitalize on the mistakes Aidan Chiles make, force some turnovers. I think if Ohio State can win this turnover battle, I think it's going to be in good shape in its first road game of the year in East Lansing, but it's only going to get tougher from here. You got Michigan State this week, then you're going to take another step up to Iowa the week after, and then you're going to take a big step up to, what we think is going to be the toughest game of a regular season for the Buckeyes against Oregon. And so I think there's good reason for Ryan Day and Jim Knowles to not want the Buckeyes to be complacent, because I think another illuminating thing we heard from Jim Knowles on Tuesday was he was asked why Ohio State didn't name a defensive player of the game, and he said, you got to speak truth. We had some champions, but there wasn't anyone that we felt deserved to be the silver bullet of the game. And I think that shows you how high the standard is for this Ohio State team, where I don't think it was a bad game for Ohio State's defense. I mean, they only allowed 2 touchdowns. They allowed like 50-something yards, I think, in the second half, but got off to a slow start, allowed Marshall to drive right down the field on that opening drive. Certainly compared to the first 2 games, it was the worst game of the year for the defense. And when you factor in the fact that the offenses that Ohio State's going to face for the rest of the season, almost all of them are going to be better than Marshall, you can sense that Jim Knowles specifically wants to challenge his unit too, that it needs to be better this week and going forward.
Yeah, I think not bringing up Aidan Chiles, to your point, is especially interesting just because I think the mobile aspect of it and what Aidan Chiles can do with his legs. Saw Marshall this week with Stone Earl, getting him off of his spot, out of the pocket maybe, or scrambling or designed runs, whatever it was. Stone Earl's legs hurt Ohio State in a few spots this week. And mobile quarterbacks are always tough to defend for defenses. I think sometimes people like to say it's a trend Ohio State struggled with over the years. I think every team struggles with a good mobile quarterback. It gives you an extra blocker because quarterbacks aren't normally blocking on run plays. When a quarterback runs, the running back likes to block for him, or you get extra blockers up front. So it changes the numbers. Defending a mobile quarterback is always hard, but that is a question that you have about this Ohio State defense, and especially, Ryan Day pointed out today that sacks aren't everything. And you can point at Ohio State's one sack against Marshall, and maybe that's not a complete picture of what its defensive line did in that game. However, I do think pressure was a problem overall. Not getting enough of it, that is. And there were there was a couple of plays. Jack Sawyer was just there a step after the ball was thrown. Marshall was doing a lot of quick passes, a lot of things to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quick, to Day's point. But there were also plays where he had 4 or 5 seconds back there to pitch a tent and find a guy. And I think you've got to get more consistent pressure with 4 rushers if you're Ohio State. Part of that is going to be whenever Tyleik Williams comes back. Heard he's still day-to-day today. And I think really Jim and Ryan, especially Jim, echoed what I think we both saw with our eyes. Out of that next group of defensive tackles, the only one who flashed in any way on Saturday was Tywone Malone, which coming into this game might have been 4th on the depth chart at 3 tech behind Tyleik. Got into the game after Hero Kanu and Jason Moore really just didn't have much of an impact out there in their reps, and had a nice 4th down stop. Stone Earl slips on the play, but it looked like Tywone had the tackle anyway on that 4th and 1 keeper. He had a couple nice plays in there. So he's emerging, I think, as the potential backup to Tyleik Williams all of a sudden. But overall, 3 tech depth, a little bit of concern. Knowles seemed less concerned about the linebackers, which I can understand. I think this is, overall, you take the first 3 weeks as a whole, you're fine with where the linebackers have been. There were some issues against Marshall, but some better plays, especially in the second half, as you said. So I think there's things to work on for that defense, and that was reflected in the fact that, again, no defensive player of the game. Yeah,
I thought Tywone Malone had a really good game against Marshall. I agree, but I don't think the other usual backup defensive tackles had a great game, so I think that there's certainly a lot of work that needs to be done there to continue building up that defensive tackle depth, especially if Tyleik Williams can't go this week, but the hope is that he will be able to. Jim Knowles said, that's what they're planning on right now. Ryan Day said that Tyleik will be on the field for practice on Tuesday, but we'll see how the week goes in terms of whether Tyleik will be able to play against the Spartans. Couple other items of note. Ryan Day did say that Jaden Fielding had a tweak, he called it, that led to those kickoff issues that we saw against Marshall. Said it was nothing long term, so he didn't outright say that Jaden would be, back this week and would be the kickoff guy, but it sounds like that's still the plan for him to be that guy. Ryan did say to Jaden that, he needs to communicate in the future. If he is dealing with some kind of minor injury, he needs to make sure he lets the coaches know. So if it's something that is going to affect him, that they can address it rather than him just trying to fight through it, which it sounds like is what he was trying to do in that second quarter against Marshall. And then Ryan Day said the rotation is going to continue at right guard, where Tegra Shabola remains the starter at that position, but they are going to plan on continuing to play Austin Siereveld as well. And I think that's going to be an interesting development to continue to monitor over the course of the year, because I think we both agree Austin Siereveld's played quite well the last couple weeks. And the fact that at a position where you typically think of just kind of having 5 guys and keeping chemistry, I think the fact that they are making such a concerted effort to get Austin Siereveld in there, at least in my mind, makes me think the possibility still exists that there could be a change in that starting right guard spot at some point, even though I think Tegra Shabola has played well also.
It's been a true rotation, or it was a true rotation against Marshall, which I was frankly a little surprised to see. We've seen Day in the past say, hey, we'll play 6 offensive linemen. This guy has earned the right to play and will play, and then maybe they get in for like a series or two. It just feels like Sierreville was actually getting consistent use, and they used him in the scheme. I mean, there was a beautiful super counter play where they set up an outside trap block for Sierreville on a defensive end that came through unblocked. He clears a hole, and then you have 2 tight ends pulling and leading through. I believe it was on Travion's 14-yard touchdown run, or it might have been on one of the big ones that Judkins had. There were a lot of big runs for Ohio State on Saturday. Sometimes it's hard to keep them in order. In any case, I think Sierreville's been an amazing surprise for this team, and that's why he's rotating in and they want to mix him in, is because he's got an athleticism in the run game, especially an athleticism and a push that I think is really actually quite good, and maybe even special. And this is a second-year guy from Ohio that wasn't necessarily the most highly rated recruit. So I think what he's done this year has been a very nice development for Ohio State, especially as, you know, you're looking for more guys to step up on that offensive line. But I think we will see a true rotation going forward, at least this week, and see how long that sticks. I don't know. It's kind of new ground to see a more equal distribution of reps at an offensive line position between 2 players. But hey, it's worked so far.
Yeah, I think it's a question of, okay, when you get to a Oregon game, do you really want to be rotating on the offensive line? That's something they're going to have to determine over the next couple of weeks. But to your point, I think Austin has earned the playing time. I mean, his first play in the game, Quinshon Judkins ran behind him for an 86-yard touchdown.
Yes.
So I think that, you know, there's certainly reason to continue looking for ways to get him playing time and kind of see how that goes this week at Michigan State, and then continue to evaluate from there. Lots more coverage of Ohio State versus Michigan State, the beginning of Big Ten play to come on 11warriors.com. So stay tuned to us over there, and we'll catch you next time for another episode of Press Coverage.